Now, whether you are the royal dynasties, whether you're the Illuminati or secret societies, or whether you're the nouveau scientists, there is a set pattern of control, a set pattern of the way the power elite manipulate us and use methodologies to control us. And one of the most important ways can be referred to as the infernal trinity. It's actually a system of dialectics, but I like to refer to it as the infernal trinity. It's problem, confusion, solution. And David Icke and some other researchers refer to it as problem, reaction, solution. But I prefer problem, confusion, solution, since reaction could also potentially be a positive thing. But that's not what they want. They don't want a positive reaction, they want a negative reaction. So it's problem, create the problem, then precipitate the confusion, and then from that confusion we ask them for our solution, which of course they've already got ready and waiting. Now in philosophy, this tripart methodology is referred to as the Hegelian dialectic. In a manifesto of these secret societies called the Occult Technocracy of Power, we read, "The so-called left-right political spectrum is our creation. In fact, it accurately reflects our careful, artificial polarization of the population on phony issues that prevents the issue of our power from ever arising in their minds." And in my book, I put it more humorously, the opposition party is called the opposition by its creators, namely the opposition. It's just a game. In fact, in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, the English writer, he says something very interesting. He says, the job of the president is not to wield power himself, but to lead attention away from it. The president's job is like a decoy to lead attention away from those who are really wielding the power. And the more successful the president is, the more popular he will be. Dr. Carroll Quigley, in his book Tragedy and Hope, and he was the guru of Bill Clinton and very much in touch with the secret societies of America, he said, "It must be recognized that the power that these energetic left-wingers exercised was never their own power or a communist power, but was ultimately the power of the international financial coterie. They're masters of the game of dialectics. And that's why the triangle and the pyramid are important symbols in Freemasonry, as well as the checkerboard, which is also a noted symbol of Freemasonry. The checkerboard is how you play the game of chess, pitting one side against the other, the red and the black, or the black and the white. Now Winston Churchill, who before he got turned around to serve these secret societies, used to work to expose them. 3 years before the Bolshevik takeover of Russia, he wrote, "From the days of Adam Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx, Bella Kuhn, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this worldwide conspiracy has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century. And now at last it grips the Russian people by the hair of their heads." So here's Winston Churchill. What an authority he is. Years before the Bolshevik takeover of Russia and the murder of the Tsar is literally telling you that secret societies are on the move. The same Illuminati is behind it. Well, that figures, doesn't it? Because the Russian flag is made up of old Druidic symbols. You not only have the sickle, which is the old Druidic sickle, you not only have the hammer, which is the famous gavel. It's a very specific hammer if you look closely. The gavel of the Freemasons, the people who break the bricks. And then you have the five-pointed star, the occult star of the occult secret societies. The Russian flag is a Druidic symbol. Now, of the major offshoots of the order of the Illuminati was a group called the League of the Just, and Karl Marx was a member. The League later changed its name to the Communist League. In 1847, they commissioned Marx to write their policy statement for the public. This became the Communist Manifesto. On the surface, it all appears to be a call for the underclasses to rise up and overthrow their oppressors. However, the manifesto was financed by one of England's most prominent and wealthy business magnates, Frederick Engels. The name of Karl Marx did not appear on the document until 20 years later. So there's no conspiracies in the world now? Here we have a very obvious one. Karl Marx's name does not appear on the Communist Manifesto. It is funded by a man, a magnate, who had children down the mines in Manchester and in Scotland and in the cotton factories working till their fingers went numb. dying in the coal mines, the so-called leaders of communism. But then we find out that communism, just like the Democratic Party of America, is in fact connected to the Illuminati, the secret societies. The Democratic Party of America comes from an organization called the Democratic Society. But the Democratic Society was the creation of the Jacobin Society. And the Jacobin is just a European word for the Illuminati. The Democratic Party is the Illuminati. Its head presidential campaign is linked by blood to almost every monarch in Europe that you can think of. So in England we have the Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrats with their famous Illuminati symbols of the red rose, the Tudor rose, the dove for the Knights of Columbus, and the Olympian torch, which is called a paladine. And in America you have the Democrats, the Republicans, and the so-called independent. As Bogarde said, it's just the lesser of two evils. So we've seen that the Hegelian or Marxian dialectic is one of the methodologies that is applied to the social problem. It's applied by the secret societies and their leaders to the social problem in exactly the same way as a mathematician will apply a solution to a mathematical conundrum or a problem in algebra or arithmetic. Very, very mechanically, and it works. They use it time after time because it works. But the secret societies also have another methodology that they use, and it's summed up by the Latin term ordo ab chao. This is the term that you see in Zurich over the door of the world headquarters of Freemasonry in Switzerland. You see this term, ordo ab chao, order out of chaos. But to explain it, Albert Pike, the leader of the Illuminati, the leader of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, in his letter to Giuseppe Mazzini on August 15, 1871, he explains it this way: "We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere, the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, anxious for an ideal, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer." So here's the Luciferians, the old bloodline connected to the Nephilim, still at the same game, still with the same rhetoric. But practically speaking, how you do it, how do you control the masses of the world? You don't just come out of Harvard or Yale and immediately take the reins of government in your hand and go, this is how you do it. There's procedures, there's methodologies, tried and true for every system of government, where there's democracy, tyranny, oligarchy, timarchy, whatever system of government there is. They come with rules, with a manual, and you can't really break those traditions. There's certain ways to control the masses of mankind. But the secret societies, they sum it up just like Albert Pike did. You create the chaos and the people will fall for the control. They'll all line up behind Big Daddy and say, save us from all this chaos. The revolutionaries, the gangs, it's all funded and created by the same hidden hand. Now the United Nations, in their world constitution, they say the age of nations must end. The governments of the nations have decided to order their separate sovereignties into one government, to which they will surrender their arms. That's right. That's what the solution is. Create enough chaos, and then we have police state. Create enough chaos, and we have military law. Create enough chaos, and people demand something be done. And we're ever moving forward in this dialectic to the ultimate goal of a world order, a world state, a new world order coming out of the old world chaos of the past. One neck for one leash. Or as George Orwell said, one boot stamping in the face of humanity forever. In Harper's Magazine of 1958, the Council on Foreign Relations was founded for the purpose of promoting disarmament and submergence of U.S. sovereignty and national independence into an all-powerful one-world government. And John Foster Dulles says that the United Nations represents not a final stage in the development of world order, but a primitive stage. Therefore, its primary task is to create the conditions which will make possible a more highly developed organization. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., "We are not going to achieve a new world order without paying for it in blood, as well as in words and money." And Lord Cecil says that national governments must go in the interest of world government, world police, and world currency. David Rockefeller says all we need is the right major crisis and the nations will accept the New World Order. And James Warburg, one of the prime movers, in February 17th, 1950, he said, "We shall have world government, whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent." One of the henchmen and one of the advisors to government, Zbigniew Brzezinski, in his book Between Two Ages, says, "The technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values." But you see, in a later book called The Grand Chessboard, written in the late 90s, Zbigniew Brzezinski writes this: "Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct and external threat." And in the program in this series called Weapons of Mass Deception Behind the New World Order, we elaborate on the work of Brzezinski and how it impacts the war on terror and the machinations that are happening in this part of the new millennium, and why he'd make such a statement like that. What does it mean that before the calamities of the World Trade Center, we've got an advisor to government talking about the need for a widely perceived external threat in order to bring in world control, world state order? And Hermann Goering, Reichsfuhrer in the Nazi Party, he said, "The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they're being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country." Now, one thing that is very important to take on board is that the secret societies work in hierarchical order. Briefly, the individuals that we see on TV or in the magazines or in the history books are often not the people at the helm, even if they're presidents and even if they're major figures. To us at the lower part of the pyramid, they may look like giants and very important people and whatnot. But actually, these are very lower level. Even J.P. Morgan and some of these individuals, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, these individuals are actually just minions. They are not the controllers. They're what might be described as overworld figures. We know this from studying the symbolism of the Illuminati and the secret societies, because we have to ask, what is the top of the pyramid? What is this? We have the 13 levels, but who sits really at the top of the pyramid? This is most important. If you believe what I am saying and what Jordan Maxwell and others are believing also, we believe these beings to be alien, because, as Jordan Maxwell has pointed out, they're too intelligent. The intelligence that rules the world is real intelligence, and it doesn't seem to be human intelligence. So the people's champions that are put before us in the game are often just lower rank minions and lackeys. Perhaps most of them are not even privy themselves. They're so drugged with their own personal greed and their own personal ambitions that they probably don't even care about who's really controlling their strings. Now, Benjamin Disraeli, the Prime Minister of England, the turn of the century, who spent his life exposing secret society, said, "The world is run by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." And Supreme Court Justice of America in 1952, Felix Frankfurter, said, "The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise power from behind the scenes." Senator Daniel Inouye says, "There exists a shadowy government with its own air force, its own navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances and free from the law itself." And General Douglas MacArthur, no less, said, "Our government has kept us in a perpetual state of fear, kept us in continuous stampede of patriotic fervor, with the cry of grave national emergency. Always has there been some terrible evil at home and some monstrous foreign power that was going to gobble us up if we did not blindly rally behind it." In The Secret Doctrine, Volume 3, Madame Blavatsky says, there are numbers of these mystic brotherhoods which have nothing to do with civilized countries, and it is in their unknown communities that are concealed the skeletons of the past. These adepts could, if they choose, lay claim to strange ancestry. So Madame Blavatsky is of no doubt that the modern rulers in church and state have strange ancestry. They're adepts, powerful adepts, who contain powerful secrets. Don't believe it? Again, my work specifically rests on the horse's mouth. A conspiracy is defined, if you open any dictionary, sociological dictionary, like the Collins Dictionary of Sociology, and look under the word conspiracy, it will say that a conspiracy is only reprehensible or questionable when it is advocated overzealously and when it is based on very thin evidence. Well, in this series, and in the programs that deal specifically with conspiracy, I am presenting the facts in a very eloquent way and backing it up with tons of evidence. And specifically, my whole approach to this rests on going to the horse's mouth, because anyone can say anything about any subject. But when you go to the horse's mouth, to the letters and documents and memoirs and writings of the original members of these individuals who are very elite, they hold very elite positions in society, we're suddenly on very strong ground from a research point of view. Now, Giuseppe Mazzini, the head of the Illuminati, himself says something absolutely of monumental importance. He says, "We form an association of brothers in all points of the globe, yet there is one unseen that can hardly be felt, yet it weighs on us. Whence comes it? Where is it? No one knows, or at least no one tells. This association is secret, even to us, the veterans of the secret societies." In the movie 3 Days of the Condor, when the Robert Redford character is finding out what is going on behind the government, he's actually instructed by the CIA personnel that there's really a CIA within the CIA. We have the Masonic order basing itself on the cell structure, the pyramidical idea of decompartmentalization, but that's based on the old Freemasonic, the old Illuminati pyramid. And governments and corporations are also based on that kind of idea, that nobody in one cell has the faintest idea what's going on around him or above him or below. Now, the Duke of Brunswick, who was the world Grand Master of Freemasonry in the 17th century, understanding, like George Washington, like many of the founding fathers, and like other people who were in the Freemasons, that Madame Blavatsky is saying that the high Masons, the people who were trying to do good in that secret society, understood that it was being infiltrated by these foreign elements, and that the personages like Duke d'Orléans and Adam Weishaupt and Giuseppe Mazzini and Albert Pike were insinuating into Freemasonry something that was much pernicious and very foreign to what the original tenets of Freemasonry were. Well, the Grand Master of World Freemasonry stood up in the 17th century and actually asked for the worldwide disbandment of Freemasonry because he was so worried about that it had been overtaken. And in his own words he says, "I have been convinced that we as an order have come under the power of some very evil occult order, profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, though not infallible, their methods being black magic. That is to say, electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion. We are convinced that the order is being controlled by some sun order, after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself." Now, the Illuminati unfortunately succeeded in uniting with Freemasonry at the Council of Wilhelmsbad in 1780. John Robinson, who was a teacher or professor, was actually approached by the Illuminati and asked to join. But he suspected that something was up, and after researching it and not joining, he wrote one of the first books exposing them. And this book dates from 1798. It's called Proofs of Conspiracy. And in it he says that the Illuminati consider themselves strong because of their concealment. The great strength of our order, say the leaders of the Illuminati, lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always covered by another name and another occupation. None is fitter than the 3 lower degrees of Freemasonry. The public is accustomed to it, expects little from it, and therefore takes little notice of it. General J.F.C. Fuller, the war historian, writes, "The government of the Western nations, whether monarchical or republican, has passed into the invisible hands of a plutocracy, international in power and grasp. It was, I venture to suggest, this semi-occult power which pushed the mass of the American people into the cauldron of World War I." And George Washington himself. In the Writings of George Washington, volume 36, we read him say in a letter, "I have heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan of the Illuminati. It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am." Now, the Bavarian Illuminati was divided into degrees, different 8 or 9 levels. And Adam Weishaupt says, "These good folk swell our numbers and fill our money box. Set yourselves to work. These gentlemen must be made to nibble at the bait. But this sort of people must always be made to believe that the grade they have reached is the last." So it's the perfect way of controlling people. You initiate them and nobody knows what's above them until you get there. And then by then it's too late. And always at the stage that you're at, you think you've attained the total knowledge. It's a very attractive concept. Very empowering and very hard to break. Alois Hoffmann, editor of the Journal de Vienna, says, "I shall never cease to repeat that the French Revolution has come from Masonry and that it was made by writers and the Illuminati." And Joseph Willard, the president of Harvard University, waited till his retirement to speak his mind. He said, "There is sufficient evidence that a number of societies of the Illuminati have been established in this land. They are doubtless striving to secretly undermine all our ancient institutions, civil and sacred. We live in an alarming period. The enemies of all order are seeking our ruin. Should infidelity generally prevail, our independence would fall, of course. Our republican government would be annihilated." Now, there are many books on this subject, especially the works of John Coleman, who's another insider, who's got an incredible tale to tell. We have Fritz Springmeier's The Bloodline of the Illuminati, that again goes into the modern families who are related to them. And we have Carroll Quigley, a very powerful resource, the guru of Bill Clinton. In his book Tragedy and Hope, he says there does exist and has existed for a generation an international Anglophile network which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the communists act. In fact, this network, we may identify as the round table groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups, and frequently does so. I know of the operations of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims, and have for much of my life been close to it and to many of its instruments. Now, this book, Tragedy and Hope, is in any library. It can be ordered on the internet, and people can read what Carroll Quigley is talking about for themselves. Another great scholar, member of the Library of Congress and a major historian, James Billington, in his book Fire in the Minds of Men, The Origins of the Revolutionary Faith, he says the plain fact is that by the mid-1810s, there were not just 1 or 2, but scores of secret or secret revolutionary organizations throughout Europe, extending even into Latin America and the Middle East. It was they who, in the process of modernization, pioneered a phenomena by now familiar: impatient youth forming their own organizations to combat monarchical religious authority. The story of the secret societies can never be fully reconstructed, but it has been badly neglected, even avoided, one suspects, because the evidence that is available repeatedly leads one into territory equally uncongenial to modern historians in the West and the East. President Woodrow Wilson, in his book The New Freedom, says some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody or afraid of something. They know there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they'd better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. And Benjamin Disraeli, again, in his writings, says that the government of this country has not only to deal with governments, kings and ministers, but also with secret societies, elements which must be taken into account, which at the last moment can bring our plans to nothing, which have agents everywhere, who incite assassinations and can, if necessary, lead a massacre. On April 27, 1961, John F. Kennedy said, "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings." And 10 days prior to his assassination, he said, "The high office of president has been used to foment a plot to destroy the Americans' freedom, and before I leave office, I must inform the citizen of his plight."